again, we were able to see that these drugs are cyclic. They are derivatives of cathinone. And of course, we did mention cathinone is what is found in cat, and it's what is responsible for the stimulant activity. We're also able to look at the oxazolidinones, where again we said the morpholin ring has been replaced with an oxazole ring with retention of activity. I think under that category, we had three examples. We had pemolin. Under that category, we had tozalinone and phenazolone. Those three categories. I was to look for more details about them. The only thing I found out is that pemolin has been discontinued in quite a number of the countries because it causes liver toxicity. Pemolin has been discontinued in a number of the developed countries because it causes liver toxicity. And indeed, all these drugs do have, especially the other two, do also have anorexant activity, again, because of the bulkiness, and therefore they are not able to fit on. They are also able to interact. They will fit on the stimulant receptor minimally, but they are also able to interact with the anorexant receptor. So there was not much on those drugs because they, of course, as we said, unfortunately, some of these drugs have an influence on the mind, and therefore clinical trials are also difficult to do, even in animals, because the animal will not be able to communicate to you how it's feeling or the mental influence that the drug has on these animals. So the clinical trials for these drugs is a little bit tricky. So this morning, I want us to look at the hallucinogens so that we can be able now, as we look at the hallucinogens, I think this will be the last topic within the unit for narcotic analgesics. It was a bit, these units are not very detailed, but it had very many units. It had very many topics, rather, not units. It had very many topics within the main unit. And this is the last one that we are looking at. So I want us to be able, I don't know whether we'll be able to finish today. If possible, fine. If not, I will still finish it tomorrow. Then I now finish off the anti-cancers, antivirals. I want to summarize the unit before then I summarize the other one. So hallucinogens, and let us look at the definition of the hallucinogens. And we are saying hallucinogen is a psychoactive. So in other words, it still influences the mind, substance that powerfully alters perception, mood, and other cognitive processes. So when you look at what it's pharmacological activity, you can see most of the hallucinogens will not have any therapeutic indication. They will alter perception. The way you look at things, they will alter your mood, and they will also alter your cognitive process. Hallucinogens are illegal substances in most locales, and safety data is all but non-existent because they do not really have any therapeutic indication. Again, you cannot give human beings such drugs for clinical trials. The animals, again, will also not be able to communicate the influence of these drugs because these drugs are having an influence on the mind. For the beneficial drugs or drugs with therapeutic indication, although they are working on the mind, at least you can ask the patient, they are taking this kind of drug. It has some therapeutic indication. What are the side effects? What are the emotional effects on that drug? What are the mental effects on that drug? That you can ask when a drug has therapeutic indication. But as we are saying, the hallucinogens are of no important, are not therapeutically important. In fact, most of these drugs are just abused. They have a lot of abuse potential. Additionally, their use is uncontrolled. Their use in uncontrolled non-medical setting is extremely dangerous. So they normally, as we have said, they are abused drugs. So they will be used in uncontrolled non-medical settings to bring about hallucinations. And therefore that also makes these drugs very, very dangerous. What are they? What can we define them as? Hallucinogens are defined as we can also call them psychedelics, which means mind manifesting or mind expanding. Manifesting or mind expanding. We can also call them psychodysleptic or mind disturbing, because we've seen they will alter your perception. So, and they will also alter your cognitive process. So they are also psychodysleptic, they are onerogen, or producing dreams, entheogen, and producing religious experiences. So they are also used. They are also used for religious experiences, and they are also psychomimetic, or psychosis mimicking. And you can see, of course, psychosis is a mental condition, and therefore we are saying that these drugs, which can also be given those 5 different names, they really do not have any major benefit. There are classifications. Again, we can classify them, I think, into 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 groups. And the first group is the 5-hydroxytryptamine receptor agonist. And you can see specifically the influence, the subtype 2A, 5-hydroxytryptamine 2A receptor agonists. And these are the ones we call classical hallucinogens. We will find out that classical hallucinogens do not really have severe toxicity. They usually don't cause death, unlike the other hallucinogens. So in these categories, we have the egolines like LSD, that is lysergic acid diethylamide. Egolines, we have the tryptamines like psilocybin. Psilocybin is what we find in mushrooms, the poisonous, very poisonous mushrooms, psilocybin. And then you have also the phenylethylamines, mescaline. Our interest will be to see the differences in the structural requirement for the hallucinogens compared to the CNS stimulants, which we have already mentioned, the amphetamines, the methylamphetamine, and so on. So we will try and see whether there are any structural differences between the hallucinogens and the psychomotor stimulants. So the other second class is the serotonin releasing agents. They will release serotonin. And under this class, we have the methylene dioxyphenylamines, or MDMA, or methylene dioxymethamphetamine. So we have, this is a bigger class, methylene dioxyphenylethylamine. So that's phenylethylamines, and you can either have methylene dioxymethamphetamine or methylene dioxyamphetamine. So you can either have methylene dioxymethamphetamine or methylene dioxyamphetamine. So we are calling them phenylethylamine, just as we were looking at the stimulants. And then you can have the NMDA receptor antagonists, or N-methyl D-aspartate receptor antagonists. And these are the ones we call also dissociates. They kind of separate. It's like your body and your mind are separated. You are separated from the reality. So these are the dissociates. We're going to look at them. And under this, we have PCP, phencyclidine, you have ketamine, which we have mentioned before, and also dextromethorphan, which we have also mentioned before, as a morphinan, and of course, as an antitussive. So those are the main 3 NMDA receptor antagonists. And then you have the kappa opioid receptor agonist. Of course, we have mentioned the kappa as a receptor for the narcotic analgesics. So the kappa opioid receptor agonist, and you have, under that category, you have salvinorin A, and then you have the CBI agonists. And under the CBI agonists, we have the cannabinoids. We have the cannabinoids. So those are the main classes of the hallucinogens. And just as we have done with all the other drugs, we will look at each of the classes among which compose the hallucinogens. So we start with the first category, which is a 5-HT or 5-hydroxytryptamine. 5-hydroxytryptamine, of course, is similar to serotonin. So 5-hydroxytryptamine 2A receptor agonists. These are what we call the classical hallucinogens. Most hallucinogens increase level of the neurotransmitter serotonin, and this is, of course, here is the structure of serotonin. Just 1 minute. So if you look at serotonin, you can see it has an indoor ring, as opposed to amphetamine, methamphetamine, which had the phenyl or the benzene ring. So the difference, of course, between this are, of course, the indoor structure is that in these 5-HT derivatives, you will have the indoor ring, of course, as opposed to the others where we had the phenyl or benzene ring. So these are the most classic ones. The classical hallucinogens are believed to act primarily at the 5-hydroxytryptamine 2A receptors in the brain. Some of the common neurotransmitters, of course, we know, been mentioning dopamine, we have been mentioning serotonin, noradrenaline, and so on. So this time we are dealing mainly for the 5-HT receptor agonists. Of course, we are dealing with serotonin, which is an ethylamine derivative. And the 5-HT receptor, it is a glycoprotein carbon receptor and a member of the 5-HT2, because it's a subtype of the 5-HT2 receptor family. It is known to play a physiological role in working memory and also regulation of cognitive states and associative learning. So that is the main role of that receptor. It is believed to be involved in neurodisorders, including psychosis and schizophrenia. Neurodisorders is, of course, where you involve the nerves, where you involve the nerves, and also it can bring about psychosis and schizophrenia. Common features of the 5-HT2A receptor agonists, and most of them are physiologically rather safe molecules that show no toxicity at active doses, and they do not have much toxicity. And to add to that, it is stated that in the millions of people who have used LSD, which is lysergic acid diethylamide, there is not one case known of death directly attributable to the toxicity of LSD. In other words, dying because you've taken the drug. These drugs are very safe. But what kills the people? It is the perceptions, whereby people have died walking out onto a freeway or attempting to fly. Because of the perception, we said these drugs will change the perception. They will make you kind of imagine, because I have never taken them, so I'm also want to think they can make you imagine that you are bad. You are on 10th floor. You are bad. You can fly. So you will fly. And what will happen? Definitely you will die. They will make you feel or imagine that even if you cannot be hit by a car or you cannot be hit by a train. Sometimes they make you, they give you different perceptions so that when there is a sound, like there is a sound of a train, what you are seeing is different beautiful colors. So you might want to get to those beautiful colors, but the beautiful colors is the noise or the sound that is being made by a moving train. So as you walk out to reach your colors, for sure you'll be crushed. So all we are saying is that the majority of people, for those ones who take the 5-HT agonists, do not die because of the toxicity of the drugs, but because of the effects. The effects of these drugs is what indeed makes them die. Some of the phenylethylamine hallucinogens have caused lethal overdoses. In other words, the other ones, which like the phenylethylamines, which you are going to look at, those are not classical. They have caused lethal overdoses, although at doses greatly in excess of course, the active doses. Remember that most of these people, they start with small doses and they continuously increase so that they can get better and better effects until, of course, they hit the lethal dose. Clinical hallucinogens do not create dependence or addiction. That's, of course, addictive substances, which are like nicotine, caffeine, and so on. They affect the dopaminergic transmission and reward systems in the brain. So these drugs do not have any release of dopamine, and therefore they do not bring about addiction. Classic hallucinogens lack affinity for dopamine receptors and dopamine transporters, and there is no evidence of their producing addiction. Those are the first class, where we are talking about the 5-HT, where we are talking about the introduction, and the first in the introduction is on the 5-HT agonist, and then we can now look at the various classes. And we are starting with the phenylethylamine. Phenylethylamine, if you look at we look at hallucinogens, the hallucinogens, the first class of 5-HT receptor agonists. We have egolines, we have tryptamines, and we have phenylethylamines like mescarines. We are looking at the first category, which is the phenylethylamines. And the phenylethylamines, we have, by meaning acyl, it means you can have either the ethyl or you can have the propyl. That's why we are calling them in general acylamines. And the phenylethylamine the phenyl alkylamine class of hallucinogens can be further subdivided into into the phenyl ethylamines, whereby it's an ethyl chain. The benzene ring is separated from the amino group by an ethyl chain. And for that, we have an example of mescaline. Then you can have the phenyl isopropylamines, whereby there is branching at the alpha carbon. Remember the branching at the alpha carbon, which will give you amphetamine and so on. So the phenyl isopropylamines, and this will be the amphetamine derivatives. And under that one, you have the 2,5-dimethoxy. Of course, these 2,5-dimethoxy are on the benzene ring. Remember, when we were looking at the stimulant, we only said you can have a halogen. Once you have a halogen on the benzene ring, we even said you change the activity from being a stimulant to more of being an anorexiant. To being an anorexiant, you change the activity from being a stimulant. So you can see again here the difference that indeed here for the hallucinogens, we have 2, 5, or even 3. We can have 2 to 3 methoxy groups on the benzene ring with increase in activity. So you can see like this one is 2,5-dimethoxy, and then at position 4, it has a methyl group, amphetamine. Remember, these are isopropyl derivatives. So alpha to the amino group, you do have a methyl group. And then you have also the 2,5-dimethoxy 4-bromo. So this 4 is a position that's changing, and it's called DOB. And you have the 2,5-dimethoxy 4-iodo amphetamine. So all we are saying, these are derivatives of amphetamine, whereby the alpha carbon has the alpha carbon hydrogen. One of the alpha carbon hydrogens has been replaced with a methyl group with increased inactivity, as we said last time, because of the retardation or the slowing down of the metabolism by the monoamine oxidases. So those are the 2 categories under the phenyl alkylamines. And we have said the first one. Now we look at the first one, which is the phenethylamine or phenalkylamine. Of course, it's a phenalkylamine, but specifically a phenethylamine, because you can see that is the ethylamine. But all we are saying, for it to have hallucinogenic activity, you can see it is substituted at 3 positions. Position 2, that's 1, 2. Position, call that position 1, 2, position 3, 4, 5. This substituted the 3, 4, 5 to give us position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to give us mescaline. And mescaline is a major psychoactive component of the peyote cactus. In other words, it's naturally occurring. It is found in that particular plant we call the peyote cactus. It's a very weak hallucinogen, but nevertheless, it is hallucinogenic. And indeed, when we look at the other compounds, which we are calling the isopropyl derivatives, we are having structural modification there, and we are having structural modification at this position number 4, as we are going to see, to give these compounds more higher hallucinogenic activity, because we are saying mescaline as it is, which is 3,4,5 trimethoxy phenyl ethylamine, we are saying it has minimal hallucinogenic activity. What can we do to that compound? Is our next question, to give it much more hallucinogenic activity. And of course, we are saying one of the things is, of course, to do a substitution at that position so that we get amphetamine. And then, as we are going to see, we do a substitution at position number 4 of the phenyl of the benzene ring, again to bring about increase in activity. We are looking at the basic structure of the phenyl alkylamine, hallucinogens, and substituent position. So here we have our compound. Yes, we have our compound there, and then you have position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can do substitutions at those various positions, and we are going to look, because we have all those positions, which are the positions, as we have already said, which are the positions we can do substitution. And if you look at this compound here, we are saying at this position, So if you look at this compound, we have at that position there, no substitution at that position, which corresponds to that position. And then you have a substituent there at that position. You have a substituent there, and you have a substituent at that position. So you can see that the substitutions at specific position to bring us the specific activity. Then you have also the phenyl isopropyl, phenylpropylamines, and of course we are calling phenylpropylamines because alpha carbon. The alpha carbon, as you can see, has a methyl group, which we are saying it will retard the metabolism of that drug. And then at this position there, as we have said, which is our position number 4, position 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see the substitution of the numbering and the substitution of the phenylethylamines differs a little bit with the substitution in the phenylpropylamines, because you can see this position as for mescaline, it is at position 3, 4, 5, but here is 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5. So there's a slight difference there in the positions of substitution. So that position number 4, we can also put different groups there, and we can put a methyl group to get the dimethoxy methyl, or we can put a bromine to get the dimethoxy bromo, or we can put an iodine to get the dimethoxy iodo. And you will see that the iodo one somehow has higher activity than all the other, than the bromo one, and even than the methyl one, because of the increase in lipid solubility. So again, SAL data on the same compounds, and you can see here this, and as I have said, please note that the substitution position is different, because you can see here, if you look at this compound, it does not have any substituent at any of its position 2. This can be called position 2, and that can be called position 2. But for the propylamine, for the other derivatives, of course, we derivatized them here to give them propylamine. But for this other derivative here, it has a substituent at position 2, and as we have said, position 3 and position number 5. For this, it has a derivative at position number 3, 4, and 5. So that is something important, as we have already seen. But nevertheless, when R is a methoxy group, you can have R as a methoxy group. You can have R as an ethoxy group. You can have R as an S-methyl group. And you can have R as an S-ethyl group. And as you can see, the relative potency is that as you increase the lipid solubility of R, you have O-methyl. Of course, O-ethyl has slightly higher lipid solubility, S-methyl much higher activity, lipid solubility, S-ethyl much more lipid solubility. So as you increase the lipid solubility of this compound, of course, for specific substituents, because you cannot put any substituent, it has to be for some specific substituents, then you can see there's an increase in the relative potency. As we can see, this the S-ethyl group is the most active because it gives that molecule maximum lipid solubility, maximum ability to penetrate the BBB and to go and sit on the hallucinogenic receptor. So that is for that compound there. And of course, we did say we started with mescaline, where mescaline here is where it's at the methoxy group, and you can see it has the lowest potency. And indeed, we said it has minimal hallucinogenic activity. But there can be structural modification to give molecules with increased activity. And then again, when you come here, almost the same case, you can have the methoxy group there, the methoxy group there, and you can have a methoxy group there. And of course, if you have a methoxy group there, methoxy group there, methoxy group there, then it will be the trimethoxy phenylethylamine, trimethoxy phenylethylamine. And when you look at them, it has a dose. Again, we are looking at the relative dosages here. That the dosage will be quite high. If you put an S-methyl group there, just as we did there, you increase the lipid solubility, you lower the dosage, the dose. As you continue changing R, when you put R as a methyl group. Incidentally here, when you put R as a methyl group, again, you decrease the dosage. When you put it as a bromine, and you can see the one with the highest activity is when it is an iodide. So there is a reversal, slight reversal here, that the S-methyl, which had higher activity here, actually you find that the methyl has much more activity, although here they did not really put a methyl. The methyl group on its own has much more activity than the S-methyl group. So again, we are saying there can be structural modification of this compound to get different compounds, And you can see, as we have said, the difference between this and this is only in the positioning of the methoxy group. In positioning of the methoxy group, and in positioning of the methoxy group, when you have the methoxy group in this position, these specific positions as we see, then you have much, much more higher activity. Then we look at mescaline. Its metabolism, it is not metabolized by cytochrome 2D6, so it does not undergo any oxidative demethylation. It is not metabolized by cytochrome D26, so none of these groups undergoes oxidative dealkylation or demethylation. The main route of metabolism is by monoamine oxidase or oxidative deamination, of course, first of all, to give us the aldehyde, and then the carboxylic group to give us the 3,4,5-trimethoxyphenyl acetic acid. Of course, we do know whenever you have that free amino group, it can undergo also acetylation using the N acetyltransferases, so it can be undergo acetylation and acetyltransferases to give the acetylated metabolites, and of course the acetylated metabolites will also have no pharmacological activity. So the main route of metabolism of mescaline, which we have said is a naturally occurring compound, so that means if you're not careful, for those people who collect food from the bush, if you're not careful, you could pick some of these plants, and that is how their poisoning actually occurs when they are eaten by mistake, at times perhaps of hunger, and people are looking for food in the forests. We look at the phenylpropylamine, that is the amphetamine derivatives. So the phenylpropylamines, which are the amphetamine derivatives, and these are this one, phenylpropylamine, this one's now the amphetamine derivative, or just this compound whereby you have added an alpha methyl group. Alpha methylation of phenylalkylamine increases CNS activity, as we had said before. This is mainly because of decrease in metabolism. Increased activity may not be strictly through binding efficiency, but decreased metabolism due to steric hydrons. So the metabolism, as we have said, the main route of metabolism is oxidative deamination catalyzed by monoamine oxidases. So we slow that down. Alpha substitute produces optical isomers with the R-levo isomer having higher activity than the S-dextro isomer. The last time, remember, we said for the stimulants, it's the opposite. It is the S-dextro isomers that have higher stimulatory activity than the R-levo isomers. So that again is important. The stereochemistry is the same. All we have done is introduced this. So this is the chirocarbon just through introduction of that methyl group there. But we are saying the stereochemistry details or requirements are different for the stimulants as compared to the hallucinogens. Ortho, meta, or para substitute amphetamine has no hallucinogenic activity. So if you substitute it with only one substituent, it looks like it doesn't give us any good activity, but you do require to have either 2,5-dimethoxy and 2,4,5-trimethoxyamphetamine have much higher hallucinogenic activity. This we've already said. So either the 2,5-dimethoxy or 2,4,5-trimethoxy, those indeed have been found to have activity. Di and triaromatic substitution increases activity, and then we have already said that is a di and it's a tri. So aromatic substitution for, again, the hallucinogens is important for increasing activity. We did mention that does not occur for the stimulants. 2,5-dimethoxy 4-methyl amphetamine is a psychedelic and a substituted amphetamine. Again, this is only where at position number 4. So this is instead of at position number 4 having a methoxy, at position number 4 you have a methyl group. And this is one of the compounds that has been found to have very high hallucinogenic activity. N-methylation or monomethylation decreases or abolishes hallucinogenic activity. Again, that when you compare that with the stimulants, remember we said monomethylation with small groups like methyl group increases stimulant activity. But if you do dimethylation or you add large groups, then you decreased stimulant activity and you introduced anorexiant activity. So you can be able to compare at your own time, just try and see whether you can be able to compare the structural requirements for stimulant activity and for hallucinogenic activity for the propyl, phenyl propyl amine derivatives. This is what we have already looked at. So we are saying R can be a methyl group, R can be a bromine, and R can be an iodo group. And of course, once you have that substitution, we have already said what it does. We have also said about that group there. We have also said if you substitute on the amino group a mono substitution, that indeed decreases activity. Then you can also have rigid phenyl alkylamines, just as we we did see cyclization also in the phenyl alkylamine stimulants, and that's why we were able to come across the phenmetrazine and phendimetrazine and even the pemolin. All of them was after cyclization or rigid compounds. So we can also have rigid compounds, but these of course are very rigid compounds because you can see the rings are fused. The rings are fused to each other. So the rings are fused to each other. And when rings are fused to each other, they are very rigid. They cannot move. So that's why we are calling them rigid phenyl alkylamine derivative. The other one was cyclization. So you have this as our DOB, or there, of course, you have our bromo group there, and you have a methoxy group. All we are saying is that if this methoxy group, remember a methoxy group is OCH3. This methoxy group, through a methylene group, is joined to this position. So if you have this methoxy group through this methylene, you can see this is an extra. So this is from the methoxy group, and you add another methylene group. So this methoxy group through a methylene group is joined to that position number 6, joined to position number 6. And if that happens, you still have your methoxy group at position 2, your bromo group at position 4, and then now at position between position number 5 and 6, you have an methylene oxy. You have an ethylene oxy derivative, and an ethylene oxy derivative between position number 6 and position 5 and 6. And it was found that that compound was quite highly active, because you can see that for the DOB, the effective dose is 1.12 micromoles. But for the ethylene dioxide derivatives, the effective dose is 61 nanomoles. Can you enlighten me? Can you can you educate me on what is the difference between nano and micro? What is the difference between nano and micro? What is a micromole and what is a nanomole? What's a micromole? What is a nanomole? Quickly, class, please. What's why I don't give many questions, because sometimes you're so quiet. You should be able to respond. Those are things you did in first year. I think there is micro, there is milli, there is micro, and there is nano. You should know the difference. So of course, nano means that drug is very effective, very, very effective, because the dosage is in nanomoles. Although of course it look higher than this, but consider that the unit is nanomoles. That also is nanomoles, and of course that is micromoles. So please find out what's the difference. So the fully aromatic compound. So that is one whereby the first methoxy group, the one methoxy group has been, this was the methoxy group, at position number 5, has been made to be part of a cyclic ring with increase in activity. The other one, the other methoxy group at position 2, can also be made to be part of a ring. So again, this oxygen, again through an ethylene, through a methylene group, through a methylene link, because you can see this is the oxygen, this is the CH2 of the methoxy group. So we are adding only one methylene group. So this again, through a methylene group, again can be joined to position number 3. So to position number 3, again to get. So again we are getting an oxy. Of course, it is unsaturated. So we are getting an oxy again, an oxy ethylene. 1, 2. Yes, an oxyethylene derivative, oxyethylene derivative, and oxyethylene derivative, because we will see again, you have those two. So this ring, the whole of this now, which is tricyclic, is very rigid. And again, we are saying this compound was also found to have very high activity. So that also is some SAR of the propylamines, another propylamines. It's another SAR, whereby we are saying that even formation of a tricyclic rigid ring still improves on the activity. In other words, the methoxy groups at position number 2, at position number 5, can be made to be part of a cyclic ring with retention of activity. Not only with retention, but indeed with increase of activity. So that finishes the ethylamines, both ethyl and propylamines. The next one is the tryptamines. And of course, the tryptamines are, so those ones we were looking at were derivatives of amphetamine. And with amphetamine, now we want to look at the derivatives of serotonin. And under the derivatives of serotonin, we have the indoarcylamines. We call them the indoarcylamines. Serotonin has no psychoactivity on oral administration. Of course, you know serotonin has a hydroxyl group. At position number 5, it has the terminal amino group. It will be metabolized very rapidly, and therefore will not have any activity. It is highly polar, will have issues of absorption, so it does not have any oral activity. So what would require to be done for us to structure modify serotonin or 5-hydroxytryptamine to give it oral activity? That's what we'll be looking at. So structure modification on the N substitution and monomethylation of tryptamine gives a compound with no activity. So we're looking at N substitution. If you do just N methylation, the resultant compound still does not have any activity. If you do N dialkylation with appropriate large groups, gives active compounds. So more often than not, if you do N dialkylation with groups that are large enough to give the necessary lipid solubility, the resultant compound will have activity. N demethylation gives compounds with no oral activity. If they were to get into the body, to the body, they'll give activity, but they still are not able to penetrate the BBB to give us activity. So we are saying N methylation, N dimethylation does not result in activity, but N dialkylation with large enough groups can result into activity. Benzene substitution Because 5-HT is 5-hydroxytryptamine, and the methylation of tryptamine gives the compound bufotamine, which is a weak hallucinogen. Which one was the other one? Yes, so we are looking at the benzene substitution. And yes, when you look at N demethylation, so we are saying, remember we have said NN demethylation has no oral activity, but that compound can have some little activity, but has no, you cannot give it orally. That's what we are saying in this other position. But when you look at the benzene, we are looking at benzene substitution, and we are looking at the first compound, whereby we are looking at 5-hydroxytryptamine. It has a 5-hydroxyl group. If you you methylate, you do NN demethylation, the resultant compound is a very weak hallucinogen, and of course, as we have already said, it will not have any oral activity. Methylation of the hydroxyl group of bufotenine gives 5-methoxy and dimethyltryptamine, which has increased activity. Now we are saying, look at 5 position, you have a hydroxyl group. The hydroxyl group, of course, is subject to metabolism, also increases water solubility. So when you mask it through methylation, you get bufotamine, and bufotamine has slightly higher activity than its analog or cogena, the NN dimethyl serotonin or NN dimethyltryptamine. So that has much. So in fact, here what we are, N-dimethyltryptamine. Remember, tryptamine does not have the hydroxyl group, so note that. N-dimethyltryptamine gives a compound bufotamine, which is a weak. We confirm that should be N-demethylation. See, yeah, it should be of 5-hydroxytryptamine, not of tryptamine, because tryptamine should be N-demethylation of 5-hydroxytryptamine. So this should be N-demethylation of 5-hydroxytryptamine, because of serotonin is what gives the compound bufotenine, which is a weak hallucinogen. If I say tryptamine will not have the hydroxyl group. So tryptamine is without the hydroxyl group. So it's N-demethylation of 5-hydroxy. Tryptamine gives a compound bufotenine, which is a weak hallucinogen. And of course, it's a weak hallucinogen because of the hydroxyl group at position number 5. When you do methylation of that hydroxyl group at position number 5, you will get 5-methoxy N-dimethyltryptamine, which has much higher activity. And we can understand, all of us, is a hydroxyl group at position 5. You have masked it, so you have increased the lipid solubility of that compound. You have decreased its water solubility, and therefore that compound is able to penetrate the BBB to a slightly higher level, and therefore bring us activity. So this is a tryptamine, that is serotonin. Serotonin must have its 5-hydroxylation, and then of course we are saying bufotamine is now when you hydroxylate, you methylate. When you methylate the terminal nitrogen, that compound has minimal activity. Now when you methylate this hydroxyl group, then you get the 5-methoxy NN dimethyl tryptamine, 5-methoxy and dimethyltryptamine, and that particular compound was found to have slight activity. So of course we are saying up to here, this, when you have the hydroxyl group, up to there is bufotamine. So once you methylate it, that is why we have called that compound 5-methoxy and dimethyltryptamine, because when we look at it, that when you name that whole compound as methoxy, and then the other one we have N-dimethyl, and then you have that N-dimethyl, then now you can be able to call it tryptamine, because you've already said what has been done at the terminal nitrogen and what has been done at the hydroxyl group, which is at position number 5. So that's why we are calling it 5-methoxy N, in fact, it would be NN dimethyltryptamine, because what we have done to tryptamine At that position, we have added 2 methyl groups becoming NN dimethoxy, and at position number 5, we have put a methoxy group. So all we are trying to see is to see when we do this structural modification, starting from tryptamine, we get to, of course, from tryptamine, we get, of course, even this has a little bit of activity, especially on the catechol. It has a bit of activity on the receptors, neurotransmitter receptors. But now when you put the hydroxyl group, it becomes very, very selective, very highly selective for serotonin receptors. And then we are saying once now you do structural modification on serotonin, we are talking about developing it into a drug, because serotonin, we know, is in the body as an endogenous neurotransmitter, but you cannot give it as a drug because of the high rate of metabolism. So we are looking at how do you structurally modify it so that you can get a drug that can be orally administered. In the absence, so we are saying like the dimethyl tryptamine, as we have said, has minimal activity. But if you give dimethyl tryptamine with hamine, is found, this is compound we call hamine. Hamine was found to be an antagonist or to be an inhibitor of monoamine oxidase. So if you give dimethyltryptamine with hamine, dimethyltryptamine will have activity because you will have reduced its metabolism. So that is all this point is saying, that dimethyltryptamine is the psychoactive ingredient, but it is not orally bioavailable. That is in tea. It is rapidly degraded by monoamine oxidase enzyme. Hamine is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, and so it makes the DMT orally bioavailable. So in other words, you take tea with hamine, you will have psychomotor activity, or you will experience hallucinogenic effects of the dimethyltryptamine, because dimethyltryptamine itself, as we have said, rapidly metabolized and therefore does not get the BBB to give us activity. But if you give it with a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, then it will be present for activity. Another tryptamine, still on tryptamines, another compound that was found to have activity, unlike the 5-hydroxytryptamine. If you see, we have said 5-hydroxytryptamine has no activity. But if you look at this compound we call psilocybin, psilocybin is a compound that is found in the poisonous mushrooms. You can see the difference between psilocybin and 5-hydroxytryptamine or serotonin is that this group is at position. It is at position 4 rather than position 5. In serotonin, the hydroxyl group is in that position. In psilocybin and psilocin, the hydroxyl group is at that position. This is just the hydroxyl group which has been phosphorylated. It's at that position. And we will see that change, in other words, this, let us consider psilocin itself because this has a phosphate. In other words, psilocin and 5-HT are actually positional. Of course, this, so let us say psilocin and bufotamine. Psilocin and bufotamine are actually positional isomers. They are positional isomers, where in bufotamine, this hydroxyl group is here. But in psilocin, that hydroxyl group is there. And indeed, just that change in the position of the hydroxyl group gives psilocybin and psilocin some psychomimetic activity. That is because when you look at this hydroxyl group and this terminal nitrogen, they are very close to each other, and they are close enough to be able to interact through a hydrogen bond. Because of the shift of the hydroxyl group in bufotamine from position 5 to position 4, the hydroxyl group and the terminal nitrogen are close enough to interact through a hydrogen bond. And once they interact through a hydrogen bond, you reduce the polarity of that compound, because the lone pair of electrons within the oxygen are being used in the bonding. And also, it's like, so you reduce the polarity, and also you reduce the basicity of the terminal nitrogen. And therefore, the terminal nitrogen is not readily protonated. And you find that because of those changes, formation of that hydrogen bond and fixing the lone pairs of the nitrogen and the lone pair of the oxygen, you find that this compound is not as polar as bufotenine. It is not as polar, and indeed it is absorbed. It passes through the BBB, and it was found to do have activity. So that is psilocybin, and psilocybin is a phosphorylated derivative, and in the body through phosphatases, it will be hydrolyzed to give us the psilocybin, to give us the psilocin and psilocin. It can, in some books we spell it as PSY, which is PSY. Psilocin was found to have hallucinogenic activity, and indeed it is found in some of the mushrooms, poisonous mushrooms. So here we are only comparing. So we are starting with that is our serotonin, and that is our psilocybin, whereby there is methylation at that point, phosphorylation at that time point. This is our bufotenine, and we can see bufotenine is just methylation of serotonin. Then, of course, we can have tryptophan change into tryptamine, and of course, then if that happens, then there can be hydroxylation, and of course, hydroxylation or not hydroxylation, and then methylation, whereby hydroxylation and if you do hydroxylation and the group is at position number 4, we have seen you can have good activity. If it's at position number 5, you do not have very good activity. We have also seen if you methylate the hydroxyl group, then to get the methoxy, like you get the methoxy bufotenine, then you find the resultant compound has slightly more activity. So those are some of the structural changes. So we are looking at the structural changes you can do to serotonin, so that the serotonin can even have increased activity or even have oral activity, because psilocybin and psilocybin do have oral activity, because if you take those poisonous mushrooms, indeed they are toxic. So in biosynthesis of psilocybin, as we have said, it is found in mushrooms. You can start with L-tryptophan, and you can see tryptamine and tryptophan. The difference is that tryptophan has a carboxylate group, and then you have the aromatic amine acid decarboxylase. Aromatic amine acid decarboxylase. This is an enzyme we came across when we were looking at Parkinsonism or Parkinson's disease. So you have aromatic amine acid decarboxylase when we are looking at dopamine and L-dopa and their metabolism. Aromatic amine acid decarboxylase, and of course that will remove the carboxylate group as carbon dioxide, and you get tryptamine, and then the tryptamine can be acted on by tryptamine methyl transferase. So this now in the body can be acted on by tryptamine methyl transferase, and the tryptamine methyl transferase will add 2 methyl groups there to give us the dimethyl tryptamine, and of course the dimethyl tryptamine can undergo oxidative hydroxylation catalyzed by 4-hydroxylase. So that is the 4-hydroxylase to give us a hydroxyl group at that position, and then you have the psilocin. So that, of course, is psilocin now, and you have the psilocin kinase. Then you have the psilocin kinase, and once you have the psilocin kinase, it will add the phosphate at that position. So this is how the mushrooms will synthesize, the biosynthesis of psilocybin and psilocin. Remember, both the psilocin and psilocybin, both of them are poisonous. Both of them are hallucinogenic when taken orally. And as I have explained, and we are going to look at it in a minute, it is because of the positioning of the hydroxyl group. Change of the hydroxyl group from position 5 to position number 4 gives that compound activity. So we are looking at now psilocin versus bufotenine, because if you look at that is bufotenine, you can see the hydroxyl group is at position number 5, and you can see psilocin, the hydroxyl group is at position number 4. So these two compounds are constitutional isomers, as I already mentioned. There is a critical difference in the activity. Psilocin is orally active, whereas, as we have said, bufotenine is not orally active. And now we explain why. And as I had already said, if you look at this is a hydroxyl group, whereby that hydroxyl group, that is delta negative, delta positive, and then you have your nitrogen, that's delta minus and delta negative, and you can have a hydrogen bond, and the hydrogen bond will be the bond between you have an oxygen through hydrogen to nitrogen. So, and this is only happening, it's happening in psilocybin because of the fact that the hydroxyl group is much nearer. It is in position 4 and not in position number 5. That does not happen in B49 because of the fact that the hydroxyl group is a little bit far. So once you have that hydrogen bond, see the next point. So you see, so we have now have that oxygen and the hydrogen and the nitrogen. So nitrogen, as I had said earlier, because now it's using its lone pair of electrons in binding, it will have lower basicity, and it's also shielded. So it is bound, it is shielded, and because you have this kind of loop, it's shielded, and once it's shielded, then it means you lower, it will still be metabolized, but you lower the rate or the accessibility of the monoamine oxidases to this nitrogen, in order to do, of course, first of all, it's supposed to do oxidative N dealkylation, and then to do oxidative deamination. So you find that the metabolism of this compound is retarded. It's slowed down because of the fact that there is shielding. Also, the polarity of that compound is also decreased because of that shielding. So we can note the hydroxyl group of psilocybin is a little bit closer to the amine. It is able to form a hydrogen bond between the 4-hydroxyl group and the 3-ethylamine group. This hydrogen bond shields electron lone pair amino group from deamination by monoamine oxidases, which means that unlike B49, psilocybin is orally active. The hydrogen bond also decreases the molecule proton accepting capacity, decreasing its rate of ion. The hydrogen bond also decreases the molecule's proton accepting. In other words, it decreases the basicity of the amino group. Or when you form the hydrogen bond, remember a bit of the lone pair of electrons is utilized there, and therefore you decrease the basicity of the nitrogen, and therefore decrease rate of ionization. At blood pH, there is more of the psilocybin in the non-ionized lipid soluble form, which is able to cross the cell membrane and thus enter the central nervous system. Psilocybin is a more lipophilic compound closer to an ideal value for drugs to effectively enter and bind the appropriate receptor. So we are talking about those three things. There is the shielding, therefore decreased metabolism. There is decreased basicity of the terminal nitrogen, and therefore less protonation, higher concentration of the anionized molecule, which better penetrates the molecules. There is higher. So from this above one, you can therefore conclude that this molecule will have higher lipid water partition coefficient, better penetration of the membranes, and therefore that explains why psilocybin has oral activity compared to B49. Metabolism of psilocybin. There we have your psilocybin in the body, and the alkaline, you can have the enzyme alkaline phosphatase. So the alkaline phosphatase will hydrolyze the phosphate, will hydrolyze the phosphor. This diester bond, it will hydrolyze that bond, and in hydrolyzing that bond, of course, to give us a hydroxyl group there, and that is the give us the psilocybin, and that is pharmacologically active. And of course, that compound now can undergo metabolism through monoamine oxidases, and if it undergoes monoamine oxidases, it will give us the 4-hydroxy-3-acetaldehyde, which of course the acetaldehyde can further move into the carboxylic, into the alcohol. The alcohol then moves into the carboxylic acid. So when it moves into the alcohol, you get the 4-hydroxy triple-4, or it can move into the carboxylic acid where you have the 4-hydroxy-indole-free acetic acid. So all we are saying is that we have said this can undergo oxidation, monoamine oxidases, first to the aldehyde, then oxidize to the alcohol, and aldehyde, that will be a reduction to the alcohol, and then further oxidation into the carboxylic acid. And of course, that carboxylic acid has low lipid water solubility, high water solubility, readily removed from the body. So I hope that is clear. Structure activity relationship, again, we are looking at this. We remember we did mention even for the 5-hydroxytryptamine, even for the bufetamine, if you do methylation of the hydroxyl group, you will increase the activity because you will decrease the water solubility. You mask the hydroxyl group, which is also a very ready subject for metabolism and therefore increase lipid solubility. So that's why we are saying all these derivatives have a methoxy group at that position. So it is like serotonin, where 5-hydroxyl group has undergone methylation. So that is that position there. Then you have the nitrogen. You can either have where R1 or R2 are hydrogens, and that was found not to be psychedelic again, not psychedelic. And then you could have a hydrogen and a methyl group again. It was also found not to be psychedelic enough. But if you had a methyl group, you have a methyl group there and a methyl group there, it had a little bit of activity. That was, in fact, the methoxy, the one we called the methyl, the 5-methyl bufetamine, because that you put a methoxy, you have added a methyl group there. So what we did mention that when you have that compound had slightly higher activity. You can add, I removed most of those, so let me go the ones I thought were important. So if you look at the first two, they were found not to have any psychedelic activity or any hallucinogenic activity. But if you add that group there, and remember we even said you can even add larger group. Methyl groups are responsible for minimal activity. You add larger groups like isopropyl, and you have increased activity, positive, and it is like LSD, like psychedelic activity. So when you put isopropyl there, again a very major difference from the stimulant, the psychomotor stimulant SAR, whereby we said you cannot have large groups there. You have large groups there, then you don't have activity. So again, look at the similarity with the other compounds we have looked at, even the ones we have looked at as the phenyl alkylamine derivatives. The only difference is in this one you have only one methoxy group. The other you could have up to 3, or you could have 2 with a different substituent. So it looks like the methoxy group is a group that introduces, when put in this compound, it introduces CNS activity. The tryptamines are extremely sensitive substitution on the indoor ring, and nearly any substitution besides those shown previously result in diminished activity. So you can see the only acceptable substitution is the methoxy group, and of course we have the ethylamine substitution, whereby you can either have a methyl substitution or a slightly larger substitution with retention of activity. Switching the indoor for another heterocycle such as benzofuran, you could make this as a benzofuran, whereby the N nitrogen is replaced with an oxygen, or a benzothiophene replaced with a sulfur, produces compounds with modest but diminished activity. So the indoor ring. So the indoor ring was found to have the maximum activity compared even to benzofuran or benzothiophene. Those, of course, did have activity, but was much lower than the indoor ring, and that is why the indoor ring is the one is a drug, is a compound. The indoor ring has much more activity than either of the other compounds. The N-dimethyltryptamine, we said it's inactive orally, or the effects clear very quickly. The dimethyl combined with hamine, we have said it's a selective monoamine oxidase inhibitor with increased activity. We said that alpha methyl tryptamine AMT slows monoamine oxidase activity and increases lipophilicity. So again, just as we had said earlier, we can do again a substitution, just like they are here, like the amphetamines and so on. If you do an alpha substitution, again, that slows down metabolism and also increases activity. So that is common for all, whether they are the indole derivatives or they are the phenethyl or phen isopropyl alkyl derivatives. That SAR is possible for all of them. Then the stereochemistry, alpha methylation introduces a chirality and optical activity. The R levoisomer has higher activity than the S dextrose. So again, for hallucinogenic activity, this is still obeying the same stereochemical characteristic as for the phenyl alkyl or the amphetamine, the phen isopropyl derivatives, whereby it is the R-levo isomer which has activity, as opposed to the stimulant where it is the X-dextro which has more activity. That again are the indole derivatives. Again, remember these drugs mainly, as we said, they are psychedelics, they are hallucinogens, they are mind expanders, and so on. They really do not have a therapeutic indication, but are mainly used as abuse drugs. Then we have another drug, LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, and you find that any change, if you look at the structure, because it is populated because of the numbering, but if you look at this compound, you come from here, you come round that way, you can still see the phenyl ethyl amine structure within this bulky structure. But all we are saying is that, of course, the added compound, the added substituents, the numbering starts from this nitrogen here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and going round. So we are saying, if you look at position 8, we do have this carbonyl group, and we do have this substituent here. This is the substituent we are talking about. And we are saying any change in the amide substitution, this is the amide, definitely, NC double bond O. Any change in the amide substitution results in substantial decrease in potency. So in other words, we are saying we do require, it's ethyl amide for optimal or maximum activity. LSD LSD is extreme in vitro potency does not correlate with its 5-HT binding, indicating an additional mechanism. In other words, it was found to have it has very high hallucinogenic activity, and therefore it did not relate well. It could not be fully explained by binding the 5-HT receptor. So there could be another added mechanism of action. But as I said, some of them be difficult to know because of the mode of action of these drugs. Preparation and stereochemistry, LSD is prepared by reacting lysergic acid with diethylamide. That's its chemical compound. It has 4 different isomers. So if you look at it, if it has 4 different isomers, it means it has 2 chiral centers. It has a chiral center, as you can see, at position number 5. It should be number 5 and number 8. So it has this one there and this one here. 5 and 8. Those are the main chiral centers, because this could be hydrogen and that can be a hydrogen. So that's why I'm not naming that. So it has chirality at position number 5 and at position number 8. And its chirality is important. The stereochemistry of LSD is important for its activity. So it has 4 different isomers. Only the 5R, 8R dextroisomer is psychoactive. So 5R, 8R dextroisomer is psychoactive. And this mixture of therefore of LSD shows only have the potency of the dextro form. And when you look at its stereochemistry, so this is stereochemistry, this is the structure of LSD, whereby at position 5, you can see your amide. The ethyl amide has the beta orientation, and the hydrogen at position number 5 is carrying the beta orientation. That is our LSD. Then you can have the iso, and definitely that's the dextro R isomer. Then you can have your iso LSD, where the position 5, the hydrogen is having the beta orientation, whereas at position number 8, the amide is having the alpha orientation. When it is that mixed at position 5, hydrogen having beta, and at position 8 having alpha, we call it the iso. You can have the changeover of this, whereby now the beta is at position number 8 and the alpha it is at position number 5. That is what you call the L. So this is called iso LSD. And so this is the iso LSD. The other one is called the L LSD, where you have a changeover of that stereochemistry. And that can be done in either basic media or acidic media. And now when you have the complete change, both positions now are carrying the alpha orientation. Both positions carrying the alpha orientation, that is what we call the L-iso. So you can have this changing such that you have this position and that position carrying the alpha orientation, you have the L-iso. So the L-iso is more related to by the name iso LSD, and this is the L-iso LSD, and this is the iso LSD. So this one is this one which has changed, so that this one now becomes an alpha orientation. In this one, it is this position that has changed, so it carries the alpha orientation. So in this changes carries an alpha orientation. So both of them now are alpha orientations. In this one, only one. So in the L, only one changes, and it's at position number 5. And now that carries L, is what we're calling the LSD. And we are therefore saying it's the dextro, which I believe is this one. I will confirm, but I believe the dextro is whereby you have it having the beta orientation on both, and that's why we are calling it LSD anyway. Beta orientation at position number 5, and both of them are R. And then the L-iso LSD, where both of them are S at position number 5, and position number 6 has much lower activity. The others, of course, do not have any activity. So we have said it is only the F which is psychoactive. Indeed, the other two, all the other 3, it's only this which has activity. All the other 3 do not have activity. And that's when you make it a racemic mixture, we have said it will have lesser psychoactive activity. But do remember, the separation of making it pure also is a very expensive process. From there, hope you're still on time. Let's still have a bit of time. Then we look at the serotonin releasing agents. So we are now done with we are looking at that class of we are looking at the ones which bind, which are 5. I believe we are looking at the 5-HT. I'm not wrong. Yes. Doacyl. Yes. So now we want to go to the next class, and the next class is the class. The first one was the 5-HA. We're looking at 5-HT, 2A agonists. Now we want to look at the next category, and the next category are those that are serotonin releasing agents. In other words, when they can use the same transporters, get into the vesicles and release the serotonin. Once they release the serotonin, then they will have the same activity. So serotonin releasing agents, so they will have the same activity as agonists. It's only that these ones now are releasing the serotonin itself. And under that class, we have the amphetamine and methamphetamine derivatives, amphetamine and methamphetamine derivatives. You look at this there, and you go, of course, this way. That definitely is amphetamine. So all they have done, you have a hydroxyl group there, and cyclization. So that is amphetamine derivatives, and also methamphetamine. Methamphetamine, because methamphetamine is when the amino group has been methylated. So this particular compound is what we are calling methylene because of that group there. Methylene dioxy, because of those two. You compare this with the ones we talked about, the rigid compounds of the amphetamines. You remember the rigid compounds had only one. Where you remember where they had the methoxy group, and you say the methoxy group can be part of the ring, but they had only one, and that's why I was calling them ethylene oxy, because in place of this oxygen they had an ethylene group. So please note that difference. So this one is the methylene because it's one dioxy, and then you can see either it's amphetamine like this one, dioxy methamphetamine, or you can have methylene dioxy amphetamine, and those are the main two compounds which are found in this category, and they really do, they cause a lot of, they have very high hallucinogenic activity. Indeed, they are known as ecstasy. That is I think the methylene dioxy, methamphetamine is also known as ecstasy. Methylene dioxy, methamphetamine stimulates serotonin release through membrane transport system, is responsible for reuptake and storage. In other words, it will be taken up, get into the vesicles, and falls out or release the serotonin. Causes derealization, depersonalization. These are the ones we talked about, change in perception. So there's derealization, depersonalization, and other alterations of consciousness. So in other words, you are not like yourself. You are completely different. You're out of this world. In fact, it is like your mind and your body are not coordinated. They are not coordinating well. Unlike classical hallucinogen, MDMA has some significant toxicity issues, and overdosages can cause to death. Overdosages result in serotonin syndrome, which will bring about increased heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, results in shock and death. Remember, we did say the others, of course, it can still cause toxicity, but it's not as bad as for the serotonin releasing agents. And it has been found that the methylene dioxy amphetamine has much more activity than methylene deoxy methamphetamine, unlike what you would have expected. Because in all the other drugs, the amphetamine is the one which has more activity. The methylamphetamine is what has more activity than the amphetamine. So we are saying the methylene deoxy amphetamine has more activity than the methylene deoxy methylamphetamine. And this was found because the methylene deoxy methamphetamine has very high lipid solubility, resulting in depoterization, is not able to get into the receptors, and also this larger molecule is somehow not able to sit on the psychedelic receptor as well. That is MDMA, which is a larger molecule with steric hydrons, was found not to sit as well on the receptor as the methylene dioxy amphetamine. So please note, methylene deoxy methamphetamine has lower psychedelic, we are very specific, psychedelic activity as compared to methylene deoxy amphetamine. The synthesis of methylene deoxy methamphetamine, and the basic scheme is the oxidation of the plant oil saffron, which you can see is a methylene dioxybenzene, methylene dioxy 1-allyl-2,3 methylene dioxybenzene into a ketone. So this, you start with this, we are calling the saffron, make it into a ketone, and then from there, it is then condensed with methylamine and reduced to the final product. So that is condensed with methylamine, CH3NH2, you condense it, and then the final product is you reduce it to give you the compound that you require. So we are starting with saffron, which is pure methylene deoxide product anyway. It's a pure methylene deoxide derivative. So step 2 is reversible imine formation, occurs spontaneously when the ketone is placed in solution with methylamine free base, not the hydrochloride salt. Then the last stage is where we call reduction. You can use hydride, you can use the aluminum mercury amalgams, you can use you can reduce it using electrolysis or catalytic hydrogenation to give you the MDMA. The metabolism, that is our MDMA, methylene deoxymethamphetamine, and it can undergo oxidative and dealkylation, oxidative and demethylation to give us an amino in place. This methyl group is removed, and you get an amino group there, and then now that can undergo oxidative demethylation, and once it does so, you get a hydroxyl group there and a hydroxyl group there to get position 1, 2, 3, 4 dihydroxy amphetamine, dihydroxyamphetamine, and then that can be acted on by catechol O methyltransferase, and of course the enzyme is some methyltransferase, and of course if that happens, it only means you will get a methoxy group in that position there, and to give us again position 1, 2, 3, to give us 3 hydroxy methylamphetamine. Then from there you can get so that is our final product there. Then again, this is just a change. You start with the other enzyme. Instead of here, you can see here we started with cytochrome 3A4, and then we came to cytochrome 2D6. So this is a changeover. You start with cytochrome 2D6, and therefore you start with demethylation. And once you start with demethylation, does it give us the same product, NH? And demethylation? This one, or this, so this demethylation by cytochrome 2D6, the cytochrome 2D6 is doing the demethylation of the ethylene dioxide ring. So it will demethylate, remove the demethylation by removing this. That's why we are calling it 2-demethylation. But the cytochrome 2D6 is very specific. It is having an influence on the methylene dioxide ring. So you now start with that. So that's why we are saying it's just a changeover. So cytochrome D6 demethylation, and then after that, you get that compound, and then now you get again your catechol O methyltransferase. So you get that there, and that is said again to undergo and demethylation. The enzyme is not well known, and you still get where we were at the beginning. So you can either use that route or that route, and the final metabolite is actually the same. And even the enzymes are the same. It is only change. The sequencing is what is changing. The first place you start with cytochrome 3A4, then you go to cytochrome 2D6, and you end with the COMT. This one you start with the cytochrome 2D6 and then the COMT. And we are not sure that the cytochrome 3A4 is responsible for any of the metabolism when we start with the demethylation of the dioxyring. So that is the metabolism of MDMA. Then from there, we have another category. As I said, there are so many. There are quite enough. There were about 5 classes. The other class, so that one we have finished. That was the 2 compounds, both the methylene deoxy, the methamphetamine and methylene deoxyamphetamine are the ones that are serotonin releasing agents. Then from there, we go to the next category, and the next category is NMDA receptor antagonists or the dissociates, and methyl D-aspartate receptor antagonists or the dissociates. We have already mentioned dextromethorphan, not very new to us. Ketamine also, we have mentioned when we were looking at the general anesthetics. So we did mention it's an analgesic and so on, and it's a dissociate. In fact, even then, we called it a dissociate general anesthetic. So the N-methyl D-aspartate, that's a receptor, is a predominant molecular device for controlling synaptic plasticity and memory function. When we talk about synaptic plasticity, you are the ones who have done a lot of pharmacology. Can you tell me what is synaptic plasticity? And answer quickly. Mnakaa sana mpaka mnafanya niendelee. What is synaptic plasticity? What is synaptic plasticity? Have you done this in pharmacology? Na mnakimianga gani? You don't want to say anything. Class, muko. Kwani hampo? Leo mmekimya sana. Kwani mpo? Can I see by a show of hands? Perhaps I've been talking to myself. Mmekimya kabisa kwa nini? What has happened? Students, muko. Mmekimya sana mpaka mtu anafika pahali anashindwa kwani anajiongelesha. Because you're not responding and you normally respond. I haven't seen that behavior. Yeah, you have been responding. What is synaptic plasticity? Have you mentioned that in pharmacology? All right. At least I can see. Yeah, at least respond. Hey, very good. When you don't show any response, then you demoralize somebody completely. They feel like they are talking to themselves. So have you heard of synaptic plasticity? And if you haven't heard of it, when you talk about synaptic plasticity, these are the changes that occur within the synapse, within the junctions. You know, when so that you can have that communication, continued communication between the neurons. You know, there are not two neurons which are anatomically joined together. You find that one neuron ends and then another one ends, and then there is a cleft or synaptic cleft or some space. So that's in that space for you to have transmission to continue or conduction to continue, past conduction to continue. Once the information gets to the end of the neuron, there must be release of neurotransmitters. Those neurotransmitters or chemical transmitters are the ones that now will transmit the information from one neuron to the other neuron. So it is just the normal functioning. We talk about synaptic plasticity is just how the ability or the conductance or how the information or the impulse transmission continues within the synapse. So within the synapse, you must have a methodology of continuing the impulse transmission. Otherwise, it will get to the neuron and to the axon, and it is finished. It gets to the end and it's finished. Because we have said when you have a neuron, it comes to a dead end. And of course, there's another one because not two neurons are joined together anatomically. It gets to the end, neuron end, and of course, that's where you have within that cell, and that cell at the neuron end, that's where you have the vesicles, they have neurotransmitters. So when they are triggered, those neurotransmitters are released. They pour into the synapse, they diffuse, they get into the other neuron, and they bring about the continuation of the conduction. So it is the change that occurs. Of course, you guys are very quickly umeangalia, but it is okay. So we are only saying is that once you understand the anatomy of the nervous system, once you understand the anatomy of the nervous system, we are saying between two neurons, there must be communication. You have a synapse, and you must have communication between those two neurons. So the changes that occur there, so that there is continuation in impulse conduction. That is, of course, the information being passed on into the neurotransmitters or into those chemicals. It passes through the synapse or through the junction into the other neuron. That is what we are calling the synaptic plasticity. So we are saying that they are responsible, the predominant molecular device for controlling synaptic plasticity and memory function. So it is an important, very, very important a receptor. And you can see we are calling these drugs we are mentioning are antagonizing that receptor, including PCP or phenylcyclidine. You can see the structure. Phenylcyclidine, it has a piperidine ring, and it has, of course, a cyclohexane ring joined to a piperidine ring and joined to a phenyl ring. Quite a simple structure to remember. The dextromethorphan, this is a compound we have looked at. Of course, this is a morphinan derivative. And of course, it is a codeine derivative also. It's a morphinan, of course, not a codeine derivative, but having structural resemblance with codeine, in that at position number 3, in place of hydroxyl group found in morphine, you have a methoxy group. And of course, this compound, therefore, is an antitussive. This is a compound that is found in quite a number of cough mixtures. And you can see we are saying also it is a hallucinogen. So it's indeed, I think most probably it has been removed. Then you have ketamine, a drug that we have looked at before as a dissociate general anesthetic. And then you have also methoxetamine, and I think it has there is similarity there, NH, and that's an ethyl group there. And then again, of course, these substituents are in different positions. This one is ortho, this one is meta, and these are methoxy, as opposed to ketamine, where it's a chloro group. So you can see where the methoxy is coming from. Is that methoxy there? That's a chloro group. And of course, the tamine is almost the same. So the methoxetamine, ketamine, but of course, there's some structural difference. Instead of the methyl group found in ketamine, you have an ethyl group. Instead of the chloro group found in ketamine, you have a methoxy group, and there is also a shift in the position of the methoxy group in methoxetamine. Methoxetamine, you find, as we have said, it is in the meta position. In ketamine, it is in the ortho position. So those are some of the differences. And therefore, you can note, of course, this is the kind of receptor we are talking about, and you can see glutamate is we call it N-methyl-D aspartate. It's a specific agonist mimicking glutamate. That's why we call it NMDA. So because this compound can also bind the receptor. So you see it. You can have you have a receptor for glutamine, and you also have a receptor for glycerin, which helps in the optimal functioning of that receptor. So activation of NMDA receptor requires binding of glutamine or aspartate. So either N-methyl-D aspartate or glutamine. But aspartate does not stimulate the receptor very strongly. In addition, this receptor also requires the binding of the co-agonist glycine for the efficient opening of the ion channel, which is part of this receptor. So once you have glycine, glutamate, or aspartate binding, then the receptor functions maximally. They say that the receptor is not very specific for the ions. It can produce quite a number of ions, but the main one, of course, as you can see, is calcium ions. Then this is ketamine. You can have S-ketamine. This we had looked at ketamine before, and we have said its metabolism. We have mentioned its metabolism before, and demethylation to give us no ketamine. As I've said, we don't say so much about these drugs. You have no therapeutic indication. And then you have, that was ketamine. This is phencyclidine or PCP. It can be structurally modified on the phenyl ring again to have a methoxy group. So the also meta methoxy group, or 3 methoxy PCP, which is more active than PCP. So that's an SAR. So meta substitution with the methoxy group increases hallucinogenic activity. Also, you can have an opening of the piperidine ring. Piperidine ring can also be opened where you have an aliphatic group. You can see this just opening NH. Then you have the CH2, CH3. You get rid of that, some of the portions. So it's an opening of the piperidine ring, of course, the decrease in the size of the aliphatic chain, and you get 3-O-methyl eticyclidine, 3-O-methyl eticyclidine, or PCE, extremely similar to PCP in potency and in quality. So even that means opening of the piperidine ring, we still have maintenance of activity. But of course, in this one again, we have the meta-methoxy group with opening of the piperidine ring with retention of activity. So those are the 2 structural modifications that can be done to PCP with retention of hallucinogenic activity. Another compound Another compound is 4-methyl thioamphetamine. So this is quite different from the. It is actually an amphetamine derivative. An amphetamine derivative, and was found to have some activity. So it is 4-methyl thioamphetamine. Again, it was found to be also a dissociate or a compound that releases serotonin, 4-methyl. So you can see that structure is very, very similar. These compounds, unfortunately, they are not very selective for certain receptors, and that's why you are having a lot of even a lot of toxicity, and that you can have one compound can bind this receptor and also bind another receptor. It is traditionally inhibits the enzymes that break down serotonin. So it's a highly selective serotonin-releasing agent, and also will inhibit the enzymes that will break down serotonin, giving us very high levels of serotonin. So that's another example. So we have looked at how many now? We have looked at PCP. First one was ketamine, PCP. We are the dissociates. I don't know why then I brought this. See, I think there is a bit of confusion. And yeah, because we are looking at the N-methyl. This one, I don't know why I brought it here. This one, I should have brought it to the earlier class, sorry. So please fix it properly and put it in the earlier class with the, methylene deoxy amphetamine, methylene deoxy amphetamine, and methylene deoxy methylamphetamine. Kindly put it in the right place, because the highly selective serotonin releasing agent. So put it with the methyl MDMA and MDA, not with the dissociate, because it is actually serotonin releasing, not MDA, because the ones we have for MDA are ketamine and PCP. Sorry about that. So this one, please put it in its correct category as a selective serotonin releasing agent. A few minutes. I hope we are together there. So let's categorize that in its right category, not under MDMA, but under serotonin releasing agents. So we look at then, I think you can see we are going back to PCP. It must have just been a misplacement. So we are looking at the NMDA receptor antagonist, that one. And it is an antagonist for sure. At that receptor, you've already said that. It produces an aesthetic effect, and at high doses produces dissociative hallucinations. General features include deprivation, sensory deprivation, dissociation, that is feeling of separation from reality in a trance-like state. So again, PCP use produces a host of psychological effects such as paranoia, depersonalization, and aggressive behavior. So as we have said, these are just abused drugs. For people, I don't know, why would you want to be, perhaps you have a lot of problems and you want not to be within the reality. You don't want to look at things seriously. You are actually in a trance. You are separated from reality. And you can do very aggressive behavior, and you can actually say you are not aware of what you did, because after all, and that's, you did it under the influence of these drugs, and of course these drugs make you change your perception of things completely. Perhaps even as you kill, you don't see like it's anything wrong anyway. So that was the other category of the NMDA. We are done, I think, with that. But the next one, I think, was the cannabinoids. I think cannabinoids were on their own. If I'm not wrong, it's good to be sure. In the cannabinoids, if you look at your classification, they were on their own. Yes, cannabinoids. So we have the cannabinoids were CBI agonists, so they were on, I wanted just to confirm. So we have looked at NMDA receptors, phenylcyclidine, ketamine, dextromethorphan. We didn't do much of dextromethorphan because the dextromethorphan we have done under narcotic analgesics is the same. Dextromethorphan, it's only that it can also can act as an antagonist at these receptors and therefore bring about hallucinogenic activity. So the next one is the cannabinoids. So that also is a category of its own. They are small, not big classes. Any minutes to small groups. We have the cannabinoids, and of course these are the drugs we get from doing cannabis sativa, bang, marijuana. And these ones, because so many, this I think is what one of our presidential candidates was telling us to plant for its medical benefits. But you see, the problem is once you plant it, you cannot stop people from taking it, and therefore you can have a lot of problems. So cannabinoids, a type of chemical in marijuana that causes drug-like effects all through the body, including the central nervous system and the immune system. The main active cannabinoid is in marijuana is the 9-tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. They activate the cannabinoid receptor CB1 and CB2. CB1 is a glycoprotein coupled receptor responsible for the psychoactive activities of the cannabis. So it's once they activate that receptor, you're saying it is responsible for psychoactive effects of the cannabis. In the body, because what happens is that in our body, all these effects, stimulatory effects, all those effects are balanced. But you find all those receptors within the body because you do require them for the homeostasis. So within the body, there is a balance of all those receptors or the activity of these receptors. But now when you take a substance that goes and excessively excites or triggers a particular receptor, that is why you will get the bad effects. But within our bodies, we do have these receptors. And that is why sometimes you have high moods, others you have low moods. You do have all those receptors, but their activation is balanced. There is what we call homeostasis. And because you have the homeostasis, then you balance normally. But now when you go for an active substance which goes for a specific receptor, be they dopamine receptors, be they serotonin receptors, be they noradrenaline receptors, be they now as we are looking at these other receptors, then of course that activation of that activity will be in excess of what the body requires, and that is why you will get those other bad effects. So because you still, normally you get excited. Even normally, there are times you are so happy, you feel euphoric. So you have those receptors, but they are triggered to minimally, and there is homeostasis. But now when you take these drugs, they will go for those receptors and cause you a lot of havoc. So you're saying you do have the CBI receptors, and they do have their normal, their endogenous, they have their endogenous substrates within the body, which will trigger them, which will excite them to the extent that you require. Like when you're feeling very happy, you are feeling euphoric, things are working very well, and you're feeling happy, you're feeling euphoric. So those receptors, once excited normally, under normal circumstances, they will give you a balanced person. But now when you come and use the drugs, they will overexcite them and give us those problems that we're talking about. So these are not hallucinogenic, but cause relaxation, euphoria, and munchies. And this is what this is the cannabinol. If you look at the cannabinol, that's the structure. You can see this is the ring we are talking about here. So it's a benzene ring. When you look at the tetrahydrocannabinol, which is found in the cannabis sativa, you can see this saturation of that benzene ring. And that's why we call it tetrahydro, because you have added 2 hydrogens there, you have added 2 hydrogens there, you have saturated or reduced the cannabinol to tetrahydrocannabinol. And this is a compound we are saying is predominant or found in the cannabis sativa, and is responsible. It is indeed responsible for the euphoric activity that you see with those people. Then you have its metabolism. Again, the same enzymes as we had talked about. You have the cytochrome 2C9. The other one was 2C6, 2D6. This is 2. The other one was 2D6. This is 2C9, and the 2C9 can cause allelic hydroxylation. Sometimes you might not remember the exact enzyme, but it's always good to mention, even if you say cytochrome P450 or mixed function oxidases, and it causes allelic hydroxylation. You can see this is a methyl group here, and that's what we are calling allelic hydroxylation to give us a hydroxyl group at that position. That hydroxyl group that gives us an alcohol that can undergo hydroxylation. Can undergo oxidation, and at that particular point, it will give us now the carboxylic acid. Then this tetrahydrocannabinol carboxylic acid, which is inactive, but the 11-hydroxy tetrahydrocannabinol is actually active. So you can have that inactive metabolite. It has good water solubility. I believe sometimes they can still undergo conjugations, but the way it is, it has good water solubility removed from the body. It can also be acted by, again, cytochrome 3A4, again, to give us allelic, give us cytochrome to give cytochrome 3A4 hydroxylation, but this is not really allelic. So there's aromatic there. Yeah, it's here. That's why we are still calling it allelic hydroxylation, because it's not happening on an aromatic group. It is happening on the cyclic group. So again, allelic hydroxylation, and that position there to give us 8-hydroxy tetrahydrocannabinol there. And then again, allelic hydroxylation, whereby now again this methyl group can also be undergo oxidative hydroxylation to give us 8,11-dihydroxy tetrahydrocannabinol. So those are majorly metabolized by the cytochrome P450 enzymes, and that's why we say when you take some of these things and you are also taking other drugs, you can have a lot of drug interactions. Of course, these ones are metabolized. So you see, they are metabolized by the cytochrome P450. So if you take some other drugs that are also metabolized by cytochrome P450, you can have some competition for the metabolizing drug, for the metabolizing enzyme. So these are we talked about the CBI receptors. We do have them in the body, and they have their normal substrate. So they are located in the nerve cell membrane receptors, primarily in the brain and the spinal cord, and the endogenous ligands. And you can see their normal substrates or ligands are arachidonic acid derivatives. As you can see, the whole of this is arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid derivatives are the normal triggers or normal substrate of these CB1 receptors. The CB1 receptors' major role in the brain is to regulate the release of the neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and glutamate. So definitely, when you excite them, when you stimulate them, then you can see an increase in the levels of these neurotransmitters, and no wonder the euphoria that we talked about. So you have one of the compounds that you have in the body is the arachidonyl phenolamine. So you can see that's arachidonic acid up to the COOH there, and then ethylamine. So arachidonyl ethylamine. And this has been found to be an antagonist at CB1, but agonist at CB2. I believe you have these molecules in the body so that you can have a balance. You have an existing antagonist, and also you have an agonist, the 2-arachidonyl glycerol. So you can see this one again, and this is glycerol here, and this is an agonist at CB1. So these are natural, like we talk about noradrenaline, we talk about serotonin, we talk about dopamine. But you see, those ones, we talk about them so often. These are not compounds we discuss often, but these are important compounds. Again, endogenous molecules found in the body, again, to control or to bring about homeostasis, to control the way the body is, the ultimate behavior of the body, so that it is balanced and there is homeostasis. So we are therefore saying the CBI receptor has the arachidonyl ethylamine as an antagonist, arachidonyl glycerol as an agonist, and that helps to balance the body. So now when you give a drug that acts on those receptors, so when you give a drug, or when you take a drug rather, like the THCs or the cannabinoids, like the cannabinoids, they will come and trigger this receptor and definitely bring about a lot of a lot of those effects, or those effects, the euphoric effects, the eating effects, eating a lot and so on, because of the release of the various neurotransmitters, as we have said. Already yet. So we have very little remaining, which I think we have very little much, which I think we will finish. I think we can even finish. Very little remaining. Then we have the K-opioid receptor. Remember the K-opioid receptor? We did say this receptor is also activated even by the narcotic analgesics. It is targeted for analgesic effects and potentially a natural addiction control mechanism. It also helps in addiction control mechanism. We have a drug like this, quite complex a structure, but you can see if you look at this drug, you can see na furafin. Unaona tu hii tumeshaangalia that drug. It is indeed, look at it that way. Look at it that way. You can see it's a morphine. Indeed, it's actually a morphine analog, where it has the methyl cyclopropane or cyclopropyl derivative, substituent at position 17. But now, when you look at its position number 6, in place of the hydroxyl group, it has a very large substituent. It has a very, very large substituent at that position, and it has also been found to have also antipruritic activity. So this is a compound that is specific for the K-opioid. It's called norphurafine. You can't see for sure it is morphine derivative, and therefore it is a morphine analog, and therefore can go for the K receptors. But now this time, when it goes for the K receptors, it can bring about a hallucinogenic effect. And then you have another compound called ibogaine, which is an anti-addiction and hallucinogen. So ibogaine, an anti-addiction and hallucinogen. When you look at it again, a very different structure from this, but you can see, of course, a complex structure, very highly. What we notice of these structures is their high lipid solubility to enable them to penetrate the BBB and bring about the activity in the brain. Then you have also the ibogaine is naturally occurring. Again, so we have these psychoactive ingredients in tabaneth, iboga, or just iboga. Ibogaine interact with the 5-HT, NMDA, and the K-opioid receptors. So again, it's not very, very specific, and that's why these drugs also are responsible for a lot of toxicity, because they are not specific for one. It has significant stimulant effect. The hallucinogenic dose appears to be several times higher than the stimulant dose. So if the person who is taking the drug is going for the stimulation, they will continue increasing their dosage, and that is how you find unknowingly they increase their dosages until they get the lethal dose. It is known for its extreme duration and the most intense effect lasting for 25 hours or more. Its after effects include difficulty in sleeping, which may last for an additional day or two. And of course, once the person experiences a difficulty in sleeping, it prompts them again to take the drug, and the story continues and on and on. But we are saying it, you can see it can be used. It can be used for people who have addiction, but I can imagine you must use it at very, very low dosages so that it does not trigger the hallucinogenic, as we have said. It's also a hallucinogen. So these are drugs that are specific, or that do trigger, do excite trigger the K-opioid receptors to bring about hallucinogenic activity. This was just to add that the ibogaine is a compound from a plant, the tabananth iboga, or just iboga. Then the last compound, sulfonylurea A, isolated again from a plant. That one there. Again, you can see the structures. You cannot say these compounds. They don't have really an SAR, most of them, because they have really differences in their structures. And it's a principal psychoactive component of, I should have put, of course, this in italic, Salvia divinorum. It has a unique mechanism as a K-opioid receptor agonist. It is the only non-alkaloid hallucinogen known and the most potent natural hallucinogen. So again, you can see it doesn't have any nitrogen. That's why we are calling it a non-opioid. Again, activating the K receptors, produces dissociative effects with uncontrollable laughter, sensations of motions, merging with or becoming objects and overlapping reality. So I don't wonder why anybody would want to have such effects. So it will give you a lot of uncontrollable laughter, sensations of motions. It's like you are moving, merging. It's like you are merging with objects, merging with or becoming objects, and overlapping realities. Very, very strange. But somehow, unfortunately, once the worst is when you start taking these things. As long as you look at them from afar, you do not have a problem. But unfortunately, the minute you decide if day one decides to start taking them, I think the effects are so controlling, or could be initially with low dosages, the effects are good. But of course, as you continue increasing the dosages, you cannot stop, and you continue increasing the dosages, you cannot stop, and of course, the effects are also very negative. Effects finally are very negative. That's why you find that some of the people who take these things, they don't eat, they don't wash, and they have terrible, terrible behaviors. And I think that is the last of the compounds that we look at as hallucinogens. But we can close with a quote from David D. Nichols, who says hallucinogens have a unique and powerful ability to affect the human psyche. They may alter one's concepts of reality, may change one's view of life and death, and can provoke and challenge one's most cherished beliefs. Hallucinogens have a unique and powerful ability to affect the human psyche. They may alter one's concept of reality, may change one's view on life and death, and can provoke and challenge one's most cherished beliefs. So what this is telling us, keep away if you want to remain a human being. Because it's like when you take these things, you cease to be actually a proper functioning human being. Therein lay the roots of much of the fear and hysteria that these substances have fostered in our society. So kindly, this is a very strong statement. What we are saying is, kindly stay away from these compounds. Stay away from these compounds if you want to remain human enough that your definition of life, your definition of death, your definition of relationships, if you want it to remain the same, even your definition of understanding your own self and your perceptions, if you want it to remain the same, the best you can do is stay away from these products, because you will do things, and once you are back to normal, all you will be able to say is that it's not me. I am not the one who did those things. Because by the time you are doing them, you had a change of perception. You had a change of perception. So when you come back to normality, when the drug influence is over, you wouldn't believe, and you would not even want to believe you are the one who did those things. So even as you go out there, remember sometimes we studied these drugs, although they do not have much therapeutic effect, but for us to understand them so that we can also educate our communities, we can educate our friends, we can help our friends when they get they get to take these things, and we can try to bring sense to them because we understand them. Because all they have is an abuse potential, and once you abuse them, your life will never be the same again. Whether the stimulants all the hallucinogenics. And I think with that, we are through with the CNS. I think we are now through with the narcotic analgesics. I don't think I've left out anything. I think that closes that unit. And now, God willing, tomorrow we can still have our class at 5, and Thursday, I think we'll be able to summarize on our anti-cancer drugs and antiviral drugs. And then, as I told Frida, I would think it's better we do the cut on next week, either Friday, either Monday or Tuesday. There you will guide me, because you could be having